Hey everybody, it's Tay from Ways, and today we're going to be making a top-down 2D shooter character. So let's get started. First, we're going to need a character body 2D for our player, and I'm going to rename this to player. Let's just save that first, and now we're going to need a couple of sprites. So since our camera is directly above our player, we're going to have to animate our player as if it's directly above, and the assets I have are kind of wonky in this aspect. So I'm going to clone this twice, and I'm going to call the first one main, second one arms, and the third one legs. Now we need to assign our sprites. So leg, I'm going to put this here for now. And I'm going to rotate this 180 degrees. This one's going to be arm. Put it here approximately. And the main character. Actually close. Perfect. Okay. Now we're going to have to animate our character. So let's add in an animation player node. And let's create a new animation. And we're only going to need one for this, so I'm just going to call this walk of 0.5 seconds. And at 0, we're going to have our characters, or our legs position, and arms position. Now around 0.2667 seconds, we're going to move our leg and arm. So move our leg up to the other side. Grab that, and move our arm down. Grab that. So we're going to have an issue. If you notice, our character, it's too smooth. For 2D, we want this to be jumpy. Luckily, Godot gives us an option to get around this, and we can just set our movement to discrete. So if you watch now, it's much more smooth and makes more sense in a 2D aspect. Okay, perfect. Now let's add in our collision shape for our character. And this is just going to be a... That's actually perfect for now. And I'm going to save our character. Now let's create our bullet. In a new scene, we're going to have an area 2D, and I'm going to call this bullet. And the area 2D is going to need a sprite 2D to show off the bullet. So I'm just going to drag in this for now because I don't have an asset for a bullet. And we're going to need a collision shape of a rectangle. And let's just set our sprite to about the size of that rectangle, because we don't want our bullet to be too big. That doesn't really make sense. That's good enough. Save that. And now we're going to add in a visible on-screen, not enabler, whoops. A visible on-screen notifier. And what this is going to do is it's going to send out a signal every time our object is off-screen. And so we want to do this because we don't want our bullet flying forever off-screen. We want it to stop itself. So let's save this, our bullet. And now let's go back into our player and attach a script. And I'm going to call this player.cs. And I'm going to inherit the basic character body 2D movement. We're going to make some modifications to the script. First off, we're not going to need a jump velocity. This is a top-down 2D game. You can't jump, and we're not going to handle gravity or jumping. We're going to set our velocity to vector 2.0 so that we just stop when we move, when we stop pressing a key. And we're just going to set our velocity equals direction times by speed. That's all we're going to need to get a semi-playable version of our character. So if we go into Godot and run this now, you can see I can press the arrow keys and we can move our character. So now what we need to do is we need our character to look at our mouse at all times. And luckily, Godot has a nice handy function to do this. So we can just look at and get global mouse position. And then we don't want our mouse leaving the window, because that would get annoying if the person's mouse was going and clicking on other things throughout the world or throughout their operating system. And so Godot has a way to get around that. So public override void underscore ready. And we can set our input mode of our mouse, input dot mouse mode equals input dot mouse mode enumerator dot confined. This means it's going to be confined to our window and it can't leave. You're going to have to alt tab out or set the mouse mode to something else. So let's go ahead and give this a quick test. Again, you can ignore this. I probably need to update my CPP. Perfect. Not my CPP, .NET. Okay, now I forgot to play the animations, so we're going to have to get reference to our animation player, and then we're going to have to play the animation. So export animation player, anim player, and then here, when we set our speed, anim player dot play, and just play walk. And when we're not moving, we want to pause our animation. And that's most of what we're going to need in our player script. Now I'm going to create a singleton. And what a singleton is a way for other scripts to access this script. And there's only going to be one of this script. So you're going to be able to access everything, like, for example, our speed. And it's going to be able to modify it. Obviously, this comes with some risks, but we're going to create this script, this singleton. So public static player, instance. And you're going to see why we need the singleton later. Instance equals this. Perfect. So now we can move on to our bullet. So let's attach a script to our bullet. And I'm going to keep it as bullet.cs. And so we're going to need a speed amount. So export. I'm just going to do an integer and I'm going to call it speed. And I'm going to give it a default value of about 20. We're going to need a vector2 for the direction our bullet needs to fire. And I'm going to just set it to vector2.0 for now. And then we're going to need a Boolean. And I'm going to call this is shooting equals false for default. So in our process, we need our bullet to actually fire. So if our bullet is not shooting, just return. Don't do anything if our bullet's not currently shooting. Now we can set our position. Oh, and this is something I forgot to talk about. The reason I'm using an area 2D and not a character body 2D or a rigid body is because oftentimes those things are actually pretty heavy, and in bullet hell games you could have thousands of bullets on screen at a time, and unfortunately that's going to take up a lot of resources. I'm trying to show you a way that's very efficient so that it's very expandable and you can have as many bullets on screen as you need. So position plus equals direction times by float delta. And this is going to make sure our delta essentially makes sure our thing is not frame dependent, times by speed. That's all we're going to need in the process function. But now we're going to actually need something to tell our bullet to fire. So we need to create another function. So public void, and I'm just going to call this fire. Actually, I'm going to give that a capital. Keep consistent. We're going to take in a vector2, and I'm just going to call this dir for direction. Now we're going to set our position equals to the player's position. So player.instance.position. Now you can see why we needed the instance here, because this is going to go directly to the current player. We're going to set our monitoring to true. Monitoring equals true. And what this does is it's going to tell our bullet if it collides with something. Now we're going to look at the direction, if you remember that we looked at before. So look at direction, so our bullet's facing the way it's actually moving. We're going to set our bullet's visibility to true. Now we're going to set our direction. So we need our direction to be away from the player. So wherever the player's facing, go forward from there. So to do that, we can easily do direction equals dir minus global position. Because remember, we just set the player variable earlier. And then we can set is shooting to true. That's perfect. Now we can create another function. And this is, I'm going to call this private void bullet return handler. And I'm going to set if visible equals false return. If the bullet's already invisible, don't do anything. We've already handled it. So we're going to set visibility to false. We're going to set is shooting to false. And we're going to set deferred. And if you don't know what this means, this is essentially going to set a function when we have time. And so this was throwing errors for me in my testing. So monitoring, we're going to set our monitoring to false, the variable we were setting to true up here. Now we're going to need another function, private void on bullet hit area 2D, and we're just going to call this area. And we're going to call this bullet return handler. We're going to call the function we just made. That's most of what we're going to need in this function. We're going to have to add something a bit later, but we'll come back to it. Let's go ahead into our script and let's attach the signals we need to our script. So the visible on screen, we want on screen exited. Actually, I might have to build this first. Okay, Godot's being buggy, so I'm just going to paste in our bullet return handler and connect. Hopefully that runs. And now we're going to have to collect our area 2D, area entered. Godot's just fighting me the whole way. To our on bullet hit. Connect. That should be all the signals we have to connect for our bullet. Let's go back into our player and let's create an empty node. And this is going to just be of type node. I'm going to call this player shooter handler. And I'm going to attach a script and we're going to leave the name as the same. We're not going to need any of these, any of the current functions. So first thing we're going to have to do is we're going to have to create a list of bullets. And so the reason we're going to create a list of bullets is that creating and dequeuing and uncreating, essentially destroying bullets, is very heavy. And so when you have thousands of bullets or anything, it can slow down your computer. So we're going to reuse as much as we can. So create a list of bullets, and we're going to create a public void register bullet. And we're going to take in a bullet, and I'm going to call this new bullet. The word bullet is starting to lose its meaning right now for me. And we're going to add it to our bullets function, or list. I misspelled everything there. It's fine for now. And we're going to create another function to fire the bullet. Public void fire bullet. We're going to take in a vector 2 for mouse position. So if our bullet count, if we don't have any bullets left, if bullets.count is less than or equal to 0, return. Don't do anything. We can set our bullets 0, and we can call .fire, and we can pass in our mouse position. So this is going to get the bullet moving. And then now we're going to remove the bullet from our list because we fired it. Don't have it in our list anymore. So bullets.remove at 0. I misspelled vector 2. This is all we're going to need for the player shooter handler. So let's go back into our bullet and let's actually register our bullet with our player shooter handler. So let's extend this script a little bit. So actually first, I just realized I'm going a bit out of order. So let's go here and let's create a public player shooter handler. And I'm actually going to set this to export. Player shooter handler and of the name player shooter handler. So now we can go into our bullet. Now we can check if our player has a player in shooter handler. That player shooter handler equals null. So if it has nothing, return. Now we can set our player.instance.player shooter handler .register bullet to ourselves this. We are done with the bullet script now. This is all we're going to need. So now the only thing we're going to need is to fire our bullet. Let's create another function in our player. Just fire it. Public override void underscore input. And actually, I'm going to create a function. So project settings, input map. Let's add a new fire. And I want a mouse button. So when I click, it's going to fire. Now, if at event is action pressed fire, what do we want to do? Well, if our player shooter handler is null, we just want to return. Again, don't do anything. And the reason I'm doing it this way, and the reason I'm breaking off so much into different scripts, is because I'm trying to componentize our game. And so what this is going to allow us to do is if you don't want this player to be firing at any time for any reason, you can just remove the player shooter handler and nothing will change. You're just not going to be able to fire. So now let's fire our bullet. Player shooter handler dot fire bullet. And now we're going to pass in our global mouse position. Get global mouse position. So let's go ahead and test this. So let's save this and let's create a new scene. And I'm going to just a 2D and we're going to call this main. We're going to add in our player. Should probably be like there. And then we're going to add in a couple bullets. And I'm actually going to put them under just a regular node. So put in a few bullets. You can put as many as you want. As many as bullets you have here is essentially our bullet amount. I forgot to set our player shooter handler to our player. And our animation player. There we go. Okay, now we can assign our player shooter handler. Save everything. And let's try and test this out. Okay, we can move, we can aim, and we can shoot. And we can shoot how many bullets? Well, it looks... Okay, let's give this an example. Let's set our speed to, our bullet speed to like 1. Or like, yeah, let's set it to 1. Let's slow it down. So, if I click, I can't shoot anymore until the bullets go off screen or they hit something. I want to fix a couple issues here, because I didn't do something. We need our bullets to not collide with each other. So I'm going to set our... Oh, wait, here we go. I'm going to select our collision. Only collide on layer 2. So bullets can no longer collide with each other. So let's now create just a basic enemy. Let's just put it into the main scene. I'm going to add a child of a area 2D. It's just a test. So, and I'm going to add a collision shape. And it's going to be of rectangle because I'm boring. It doesn't really matter. We're just going to move it here, extend. And this is going to be on layer 2. I forgot to do something. We need our bullets to register immediately. So we need to call the bullet return handler in our start function. Let's play our game. Yeah, we're firing, and our block is over here, and if we hit it, it dies. So now what you could do is you could put an area 2D on an enemy, and then have them take damage when you hit them. But that's all for this video. If you got anything from this, I'd appreciate a like and a subscribe. That's it for this video. Thank you so much. See you guys.